Hey, it's Steve with Raybuck Auto Body Parts. I have my 2012 Ford F-150 here, and you guys may have noticed there's some bubbling right here. So yeah, this is a victim of the notorious wheel arch rot. A lot of trucks have this. It doesn't really matter the year, make, or model. It happens a lot. So what happens is there's this outer wheel arch area that's here, that's the outside of the bed or the outer bed skin, and then there's a wheelhouse that's underneath. It's that metal piece that goes from the outer skin all the way to the inner part of the bed. Well, where those two pieces meet, there's a tendency for water to build up, salt, grime, debris, and then eventually it just leads to rot. It literally rots from the inside out. So a lot of times you'll start seeing bubbles like what you see here, and then as soon as you touch it, the paint pops and there's rust and water and stuff underneath of it. This one has gotten kind of bad. It's this lower section from here to here. And here's a close-up of the rust bubbles. So you can see where the bubbles are starting to pop through. You can almost hear it. I could hear it as I push on it. Yep. Hear that? That's the rust underneath the paint. And obviously this already started coming through. These areas started already coming through. Look at that. That's horrible. That's all coming apart. So, and there's the underside right there. So you can see like the inner wheelhouse still looks fine. It's just this lip. So again, it's this whole lip right here, and where the water just sets in between the outer and the inner piece. That's where it gets bad. What causes this in a lot of newer vehicles, a lot of the newer trucks, is the process that the manufacturers use for sound deadening. They literally spray like a hot tar inside this area, inside that inner lip, as the vehicle is being made, and then as it cools, it expands and it turns into like a foam, and it's supposed to be used for sound deadening, which I have no idea why you would need sound deadening in the back of a truck, in the bed of a truck, but from my understanding, that's what they do. So as you can imagine, as soon as you put that hot tar in there, any sort of galvanized coating or anything that's in there is probably going to get eaten away. It's going to deteriorate that, and then it's going to leave exposed metal. So what happens is that foam that's in there will literally absorb the water and hold all the grime and salt and everything that I just talked about. And as it holds the water, it acts like a sponge, and then the water eventually just sits all along this inner lip and works its way through and rots that out. So that's what happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually taking this truck in to my friends down at Radonch Body Works. They're good friends of mine. They do great work. They're going to do this repair for me. We're going to record that so you can see what this looks like. So I'm going to show you the panel. We're actually using one of our panels, the Raybuck Auto Body Parts panels, and they're going to take it and they're going to cut it down to this. So I'm going to show you what the panel looks like. I have it right here. So if you ever look on our website, or at pretty much any other competitor's websites, and you see wheel arches, it looks something like this. So you see it's this big rectangular arch, and it looks very daunting. You can see this one even has the cutout for the fuel door right here. Well, I don't need all that. I don't need this whole section. I don't want to disturb that whole part of the bed. This repair on my truck is actually fairly straightforward because there's a body line right here. So all we need to do is take this lower section of the panel and cut this section out, weld it in, do the body work, and replace it. And then literally we can just paint this body line from this body line down and then blend that in instead of having to paint the whole side of the truck. So when you see a repair panel like this or any of the other repair panels we have, don't think that you need to cut the whole piece out. You can. We make them larger, have them made larger, so that way if you do have more rot, if it's gotten a little too far, it's gone all the way up, or you have areas around the fuel door opening or somewhere else you need to replace, you can do that. But you don't need to use the whole thing. You can literally cut just a portion of it out. Now some of you may say, well, why would I buy this whole panel and only cut a section out? I could just get a piece of flat stock and make that myself. Well, you can. But if you've ever done body work or any sort of sheet metal work, paying $40, $50, $60 or whatever the panel might be is a whole lot better, in my opinion, than trying to get a couple pieces of flat stock and making these curves. And with these wheel arches, they have this lip underneath too. So as the arch comes down or the bed skin comes down and it rolls underneath, that lip was already built into the panel. So literally I'm going to take this out, or they're going to take it out, and they're going to weld it right in, and it's going to be ready to go. It's going to fit the body lines perfectly. So that's going to save a ton of time when it comes to trying to make panels or doing the body work on it. So my suggestion always is to just get the panel. Even if you don't need the whole thing, just use a section of it, and then whatever section you need, replace it with that. So we're going to take it up to the shop. Those guys are going to get ready to start doing their work on this. Again, they're going to cut this section out. They're going to cut a section of the arch out, weld it in, do the body work, paint it, blend that paint line in right along this body line here, and then I'm going to show you what the end result looks like after that when I get it out of the shop.
Okay, so you can see the panel held up over the vehicle right now and the mark that's on it. They're only going to replace, like I said, a section of it. So there you go. You can see the section that they cut out. Again, like I said earlier in the video, you don't have to use the entire panel. You can just use whatever piece you need to replace the area that's rotted out. So what they're doing right here is putting a line around it. They're just putting a score around the edge of it so they can see the area that is affected that they need to work with. And then what they're going to do next is they're going to take the panel off and they're going to draw a line inside of that, and that's going to be their cut line. So in this particular case, instead of butt welding or putting a flange, they are going to tuck it underneath and MIG weld it in place. So the outside score is the length of the panel, and the inside mark, what you see right there, is going to be where the weld joint is. So what they're doing now is they're going to get this area cut out, and then they're going to get ready to fit the panel up in there and make sure that everything aligns. So you can see he's cutting along that edge. He's going to get down to the bottom of this, cut it out, and then get that section of the panel removed from the truck. Okay, so he made the last of his cut right there. He's getting ready to pull that panel down and get that out of the way. Oh, and holy cow, look at all that foam that's in there. So that's what I was talking about earlier in the video. So that is that hot liquid substance that the manufacturers spray in there, and then it cools and turns the foam, and it eats into the inside, any galvanization or anything that would have been on the inside of the panels. And it also holds that moisture, it holds the water in. So all of that foam held that water in, and that's what causes that area of the vehicle to rot out. You can see that looks pretty bad. It looks like the inner structure has some rot to it as well. So even though on the outside we saw some bubbles and you can see it was starting to get pretty bad, it starts from the inside. So like they say, you're seeing kind of the tip of the iceberg. So now we're seeing the base of it, and you can see a lot of that is rotting away. So he is cutting out the rest of that outer panel, and then it looks like he's going to have to cut some of that inner panel out as well. So right now he's scraping the rest of that foam out. I highly recommend that. I would scrape out everything that you can, even up under that area up at the top there. I would get some sort of rod or maybe a part of a metal hanger, anything that you can get up in there and scrape out as much of that foam as possible. See where his finger is there? I'd go up underneath of that all the way around, even get up under the underside of the truck and scrape it. Get it all out of there and spray up in there when you're all done with this to seal it up. But get that foam out so it quits holding that water in place. So there's that inner structure. You can see he's wiggling it around. It's really loose, that metal shot. So they're going to cut that out and get that replaced as well. So you can buy inner wheelhouse replacement panels for a lot of these trucks. This particular one though, there's only a small section that needs to be replaced instead of the entire thing, which would be a much bigger project. So what you're going to see here in a minute is an interesting little fix that, a little trick that they used that I wouldn't have thought of. So now he's grinding everything down, just trying to get that cleaned up and cleaning up around the edge of that so they can get that paint removed and get it ready for fitment. There you go, he's cutting out that last little piece down there. He's going to get that removed, and then that will be ready for fitment. So what he's doing here, he's taking his chisel, and he's opening that gap up a little bit so that he can tuck that panel in there and tuck it up underneath again so he can get some overlap on the metal before he welds it in place. Okay, so he's getting the panel, he's going to tuck it up in, make sure that it fits. And there you go. So that looks like it's going to be a pretty good fit. Maybe a little bit of, there you go, a little bit of wiggling, get it up in, and that looks like it's going to be a good fit. Okay, so now he's going to cut out that section of that inner wheelhouse that's pretty well rotten. And if you look right on top of the tire there, you can see another piece of metal. So this is what I was just mentioning. What they did was actually take a piece of the rest of that wheel arch that they're not using, and they're going to use it to repair the inner wheelhouse. So really good idea. So instead of buying 2 panels and only using a small piece of each, they only had to repair a small section of that inner wheelhouse. So they cut part of that outer wheel arch and they're going to use it to repair the inner wheelhouse. Really, really good idea. So now they are hitting it with some weld-through primer to seal up that metal, that bare metal. They're going to hit the back of the panel they're going to weld in with the same primer and get it ready to go. So now he's going to get a couple of tacks in place to make sure that that everything's going to line up properly. Okay, now that that inner is tacked into place, he's going to put the outer back in just to make sure that it's going to clear everything. There's no other alignment issues because that piece that he just tacked into the inside is going to butt up against the that outer piece there. So you got to make sure everything fits and aligns before you weld that in completely, or else you could end up having to cut it back out and start over. Okay, so everything's in alignment. He's taking the outer piece out and he's going to get ready to weld that inner piece in. So what he's going to do here is get a couple more tacks in it, and then he's going to start stitch welding it. So any type of panel that you're welding in like this, definitely recommend stitch welding it instead of running a bead from one end up to the other. You want to go in sections, literally like stitching it. So you're going to go in a couple inch increments and work your way around. If you try to start on one side and work your way all the way up the edge of it, you're going to end up applying too much heat to it and warping the panel. So you could warp the outer panel and that inner panel that you're trying to weld to, and it could cause a real mess. So you see here he's using his hammer. He's going to tap that edge over to fit the contour of that inner wheelhouse to make sure he gets a nice tight fit, and then he's going to start putting his tacks in place. So here's the first set. You can see he skipped a couple of inches. He's going to his second set. He'll probably skip a few more inches and work his way all the way up the panel. There you go, a couple more inches. And then same thing, you do this all the way up the panel, let it cool for a little bit, come back to the beginning of the panel and start over. So depending on the size of your panel, you may have to give it a little bit more time to cool, or if it's a longer panel, you might have time to just go right back to the beginning. By the time you get to the end, go right back to the beginning and start over. Okay, so he's back to the beginning of the panel, or towards the beginning where he started, putting a couple more tacks in it, getting an air hose, putting it up underneath the back to help cool it down a little bit, make sure no undercoating or anything else happens to be on fire up there, and then continuing to stitch up and around it. Okay, a little bit more air underneath of it, cool it off. Get ready to grind it down, clean up those welds. And if you noticed on this one, he stitched weld around it, but he didn't do a complete weld. Now you can completely weld that whole edge of it in, or for this particular panel, you can keep it just the way that it is right here, being stitch welded, and then apply some seam sealer to clean it up. So that's what he's going to do next. Oh, hit it with a little bit of primer first to seal it up, and then once that dries, use a little bit of seam sealer to completely seal up that entire edge. And what that's going to do is that's going to help prevent any moisture from coming in through the that wheel opening area and up behind that panel to cause what would have caused the same problem to happen again. So you can see here he's putting on a seam sealer, caulked it all around there, and now he's using an acid brush, a flat acid brush, to smooth it out, get into any little grooves that are in there, any little holes, and smooth that whole thing out. So once that's done, you want to go over top of all that again, maybe with a little bit of primer, a little bit of paint, and then get your outer panel in. So he's got the outer panel clamped into place, and he's going to do the same thing here. He's going to put a couple little tack welds up around the edge of it to make sure that everything's in place exactly lined up as he wants. And then this panel is going to get welded completely all the way around. So it's going to be one continuous weld all the way around, but again done in a stitch welding fashion. So he's going to start on one side and put some welds in it, and then keep working his way up and around and keep doing that in a circular motion all the way around the panel until the whole thing is welded in place. So there you go. You can see it's welded in. It is sanded down. So now he's going to clean up the edges and get it ready, and actually probably strip the rest of that EDP coating off there and get it ready for body filler. So that's all ground down. All the EDP coating is removed. Now he's hitting it with a slightly less abrasive disc, blending in some of that paint around the edge, get rid of that real sharp line, and give the filler a nice clean surface to stick to. And now is the first coat of filler. So you're going to have at least two different coats, probably two different coats of filler. So this one's going to be more your rough coat. You're blending in and filling in the weld area and getting a skim coat over the whole panel. And then once this is on and sanded down, you'll get a smaller or a thinner, like filler glaze coat that goes over it and smooths everything out and gets it ready for primer and paint. Okay, so that first coat is on. He's going to get it sanded down. So this is your first sanding. It's going to be a pretty heavy grit disc or paper, whatever you're going to use. Probably going to use something, depending on how smooth you got it. You might start with a 36 grit, get down into like an 80 and a 150 grit, or if it's fairly close, you might just do something around a 150 or so, or even a 220. Again, depending on how smooth that first coat went on. But you're going to get that sanded down and pretty close to where it needs to be as far as the inner structure is, or the underlying structure, and then get ready to put the second top coat on. You can see there he's hitting the whole area with a less abrasive disc to smooth it out even just a little bit more and take out some of the sanding marks and blend everything together and get ready for that next coat. Okay, so the next coat is on and he is hand sanding it now. So a lot of times what you'll do with this is you'll get a block sander and sand it down to get it pretty close with something maybe again in the 150 grit range, and then start working your way in the 220, 320, 500, 600, 800, 1000, whatever different abrasive grit levels you want to use definitely something probably closer, I would think, to 800 or 1,000 for the final. Could even be a little bit finer, maybe 1,200 or 1,500 to really smooth that out before you put primer on. Okay, so that's all sanded. We obviously skipped a little bit of additional sanding steps. Now he's down to the Scotch-Brite pad. What that's going to do is help scuff up the surface, mostly around it where the paint is, to help give the primer something to stick to. They got it all cleaned up. They're doing a final blowing it off. A lot of times you could blow that off and then maybe use a tack rag to get any dust particles off, and then you're going to hit it with primer. So that's what they're doing now. They're getting it primed and ready to go. And once the primer is dry, they'll scuff that down and get it ready for paint. Okay, so there's the finished product. You guys saw the work that those guys up at Radonch were doing. You can't even tell the replacement panel was put in here, that this was all cut out and replaced. It looks really, really nice. So they did part of the underside, you saw in the video, part of the inner wheelhouse, which is this area right up in here. So you can see the seam. They didn't have to replace the whole inner section of this wheelhouse, they just did a portion of it. And they actually used a piece of the, like I was saying, they used a piece of the arch that they didn't need, and they flipped it around and put it in there. So pretty cool. Re-undercoated it so everything blends right in and it's all sealed up. The only thing I'm going to do next is up on the underside of this, the inside, so back in here between the panels, I am going to hit with either a little bit more undercoating or some cavity wax to seal that up. And then I'm going to put fluid film all up in there. I highly recommend spraying fluid film once a year, maybe in the fall. Clean everything up under there, spray up in that area of the bed, up under the doors, anywhere there's a pinch mold, anything like that. It helps seal everything up and protect it from the winter elements. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Gives you an idea of what it takes to replace a wheel arch. At least one way to do it. There's multiple ways, and depending on the area that you need to cut out, you might have to do a little flange work and put a panel in, but this is how these guys did it. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it. And click the little like button below. Thanks.